name is Jamie, and I play the oboe. And I started playing the oboe when I was in 4th grade. And I started with, at a public school. I was in a group class, like a lot of you maybe started with DCYOP. There were 4 other oboe players, and we all learned from a book. And then eventually I got a private teacher when I was in 6th grade. And the reason was because I was very competitive, and I wanted to beat the other oboe players. And it worked.
Hi everyone, I'm Leah Arsenault, and I'm a flutist. I started playing the flute when I was 9 in the 4th grade with the public school band program. Although I started playing piano when I was about 6, I think, so I'd had 3 years previous musical instruction. I got my flute from a family member, from my aunt, so I had it in advance of the first band class. So I kind of taught myself in a way, although I definitely was doing a lot of things wrong, but I was just really excited to learn a new instrument. And so then, got to band class, started to learn all the fundamentals there. By the time I was in 5th grade, I just felt like I wanted to be challenged a little bit more, so that's, I think, the end of my 5th grade year is when I got a private teacher. And that was just so much fun because I could start to play harder repertoire and just play things that were more and more exciting. Let's see. We were going to talk about maybe some things that were challenging for us when we were new beginning musicians, and things that maybe we needed to, in hindsight, we could have maybe had a different approach to practicing. So one of those things for me was that I was always really cautious, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but I never really pushed myself, especially with the metronome, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, how to practice with the metronome, to be able to practice up to the goal tempos. So that's something that I struggled with when I was a beginning flutist. And Jamie's going to tell you a little bit about what she struggled with.
I was most fearful of sight reading. I don't know if anyone else has that fear, but yeah. When anyone said that there was going to be sight reading on a jury or an audition, this scared me, and I had no idea how to approach this. But hopefully, after this class, you'll have some methods, and if you're fearful of sight reading, you won't be after today. Okay. So, with that, when you have a new piece, how do you approach it? What's the first thing you do? Let's get some ideas from the crowd. Yes?
Look at the rhythmics, look at the keys, just look at the first bar.
Very good. Are you a musician? Okay. Oh, what she said was the first thing that she looked is at the key signature and the rhythm, and what else did you say?
Just the first bar to see what
The first part, right? To get the idea of the piece. Yes, very good. Any other, maybe some younger students out there? When you see your piece for the first time, how do you start working on it? Yes. Okay, this is great. This is how I also approach a new piece. Let's hear it. Wait. Excellent. Okay, so we're going to go from here. Okay, so what she said, if people didn't hear, is when we see a piece for the first time, we kind of freeze because there's so much going on the page and we don't know how to really begin. So what we do, what she does, which is a very good method at first, is just kind of writing in the notes and just without any kind of meter or anything, just kind of try to play through it, okay? So we're gonna put a little refinement into that and then go from there. Okay, so Leah.
So we're gonna go over the first step to learning a new piece, and that's just really learning the notes, right? So making sure you're playing the correct notes. That's the most basic thing to break down music into. So right now I'm going to be learning how to play the flute, very famous flute solo from Peter and the Wolf, which you'll probably recognize. And Jamie's gonna help me get through it. So I'm gonna kind of start where maybe some of you might start, and then we're gonna talk about some techniques to approach getting through it and being successful learning the notes.
And this is on your worksheet, the first example. So if it's new to you for the first time, you'll notice that there's lots of notes there, and there are a few other things. So let's hear how Leah approaches it for the first time ever.
I've never seen this before.
Yeah. Very good, Leah. Now, the first thing that we want to do is we want to notice what our first student said, which was, let's notice the key signature. So we're looking at the key signature. There are no flats or sharps in it. But it looks like we have something else, which is called accidentals, right? Has everyone heard of accidentals? Yes, good. So we're going to note those now. So Leah, take a minute and look through the piece and notice all of the accidentals written in your piece.
Jamie, will you explain what an accidental is for those who don't know what it is?
Yes, for those who don't know what an accidental is it is a note, a flat or a sharp or a natural, notated on the staff right above the music or next to the music that you're playing that isn't in the key signature. So the composer is changing the harmony or changing the melody with using these different markings. Okay, so this was better, but I think the best way of solving our problems here and really focusing on getting all of the right notes is to, any suggestions? Yes? Go slow, exactly. On your worksheet, below, at the bottom of the first page, slow practice equals fast results. Fast practice equals very slow results, okay? So let's see how slow we actually need to go as a professional musician to really learn every single note that is on the page.
Whoops.
Okay, note this. When she made a mistake, she didn't just keep going through. She stopped, her brain told her, maybe I didn't get that note right. Let me go back and repeat this. want to encourage all of you to have the courage to go that slow when we are learning a piece for the first time, okay? This is the way that we really get it into our brains, okay? It needs to go this slow so that our sight and our memory of looking at these notes and being able to read the notes and our fingers, those different muscles, can align. And the slower we do it, the more methodical we do it, the more it will get in there, okay? Now let's do that again, and maybe now put it quicker. Now the other thing that I want to note is it wasn't in rhythm. This is okay when we are learning the notes, okay? Sometimes we have to learn things separately. So the first thing is to learn the notes. Then later on in this session, we will talk about how to be rhythmic and have a pulse, okay? So, very good. Yes, there was one note that we made a mistake earlier, but we continued to make a mistake now. Now, when we make a mistake the first time, we can work on it just like we did, and if we continue making this mistake, then we're going to write it in our parts, okay? So if you see the examples past, example B, we have notations that we write into our own music, and we wrote in accidentals. This is encouraged. We want to be able to write our brains have a lot going on. We have a lot that we're working on all the time. So if we can put little reminders in so that we don't make the mistake over and over again.
But Jamie, it's okay to write in my music?
Yes. Pencil is encouraged though.
Yes.
Let's always put our markings in our parts with pencil.
And also, Jamie and I, we're professional musicians and we play at the Kennedy Center every week. And we still write in our parts.
All the time.
I always tell my students it's like extra insurance. You'll probably remember it, but just in case, you're under pressure. As musicians, we're put in the spotlight a lot, and sometimes it can be distracting. So just write it in your part. It doesn't mean you're weak or you're not a good player. It's really actually means you're a smart player.
Question?
Yeah, dual wind players usually have one per part. String players frequently have two per part. What's sort of the correct thing, since you're going to be sharing the music? Some people like fewer markings and find that more markings distract them. What do you recommend for the kids?
Yeah. Well, this is not an issue I have to deal with, luckily, but as long as you're very clear and don't interrupt the staff of music, you also want to talk to your colleague and make sure that it's okay, but a little accidental or a small fingering or a rhythm dash really is not intrusive and will only help the team. Any thoughts on that? Okay. So, when I said dashes, now let's move on to metronome. Okay. How many people have a metronome? Good, good, good. I need more hands though. Everyone should have a metronome. And yes, actually, Leah said if you Google metronome, it comes up right there. So, and you can move it up and down. It's as simple as that. So there's no excuse. We can get a metronome for everybody. Okay,
so we're going to show a few examples of ways to make sure you're not practicing with the metronome. So how to practice incorrectly with the metronome, because sometimes we'll think, oh well, I have the metronome on. I'm practicing with the metronome, but you've got to make sure that you're really honed in and sort of multitasking, working with the metronome so that you can get the most out of it as possible. So I'm going to demonstrate a few examples of what not to do with the metronome, and then we'll kind of break it down and show you how to work from there. Now is when the props come in.
Can everyone hear the metronome? Okay, thanks, Leah, for using a mic. Now, what did we hear? When the metronome was on, what was going on? Let's go with...
So when the metronome was going on, she was playing the exact opposite. She was playing wherever she wanted to.
Wherever she wanted to. Yes. She was playing wherever she wanted to, but the metronome was going. This is kind of a phenomenon with some of my students, is that if the metronome on, then we're maybe faster than the metronome, right? So it was rushing. Has anyone heard the term rushing before? Yes. Yes, it happens. Okay, so here's another way not to play with the metronome. Okay, so what did we hear with this one? Yes?
Right, so specifically how? She was slower. Okay, so
A lot of times we have a goal tempo on our orchestra parts, correct? Where it says, this music needs to be played at this tempo. So we're like, okay, we have to practice with our metronome, so we'll put it on the marking that was listed on our paper. But sometimes we don't know the piece yet to have it at that goal tempo. So it doesn't do us a service to have the metronome playing, and we can't get there, but we'll get there. Okay, the last example of how not to practice with the metronome.
So what did you guys hear that time? I was with the metronome, I think. Yeah.
Oh, some of the notes were not in the right tempo.
Yeah, so I was keeping a steady pulse with the metronome, but I wasn't playing the correct rhythms. And you know what? I think that was because I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. There's a lot of things to think about at once. So, I don't know. I think I need some strategies on how to tackle this. What do you think, Jamie?
Yes. So, the first thing that we want to do is probably, what's the rule? Slow it down, right? We always slow practice, fast results. Okay, so let's slow it down. And then also, let's put the violin or flute or tuba, let's put it down. Get this out of the way. So I'm going to have a slower tempo. while the metronome is clicking, let's have you clap your rhythm.
Okay. Let's all get our feet going with the metronome. This can be really helpful to internalize that metronome. Okay.
Okay. Very good. Now,
So that actually was a little bit challenging. Another option would be to sing and tap. Sometimes the clapping can be a little bit challenging if you just use your voice. It's not like this other external thing. So let's try just singing. And you don't have to be an amazing singer. You can even just be monotone. Just getting the rhythms out is all that matters.
you can say ta on ta, okay?
So, yeah. All right, so we're getting our foot tapping. Ta 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 ta. That's enough, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Very good. So now, once we do that, we're taking off the training wheels. We're gonna keep the internal beat going with our foot, and we're gonna sing or clap at the same time as our beat stays the same with our foot, okay? So let's see.
Ta 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 ta.
Okay, great. Okay, so this is what you want to do. Whenever you approach a piece of music or you're in orchestra and there's that section that is just, goes by you and you just kind of watch the notes go by but you don't really know what's happening, take it slow, you break it down, and you clap it at home or at break. This is the way I learn pieces still to this day, okay? If I can't play it originally, then I'm going to sing it. Okay, so now, yeah.
So this is just building on to some of the what we've talked about with rhythm and pulse. This is maybe taking it to the next level. If you refer back to the first page, example B, at the bottom of the page where we talked about adding accidentals and dashes above the beats. So I can say personally, when I was learning this excerpt here, it looks really intimidating on the page. And so one way for me to break it down was to add dashes, which we sort of foreshadowed about earlier. And the dashes, they just are basically a visual representation of the metronome beat or the conductor's beat, so that you can just keep track of where you are in the measure and not feel like, oh my gosh, what is this jumble of notes? How could I possibly make this work in a pulse? So I'm just gonna demonstrate how this would be with the metronome on, but I want everyone to be tapping along with me and watching the dashes go by. And we are going to count the measures of rest too. So there's 2 measures of rest. I'm going to be starting in the second bar, the one that has a pianissimo 2 keys in it, and then we're gonna count through the rests all the way through to the end of the excerpt. Okay, everyone get their foot going. Okay, here we go. 3, 4, rest, rest.
it feels really good to be able to put all the notes in the right place. But it takes a lot of work, but highly recommend it. Okay. Moving on.
Okay, so now we're going to move on to intonation and how to use a tuner. How many people have tuners here? Wonderful, a lot of hands, great. So Jamie is very passionate about a particular tuner, and she has some opinions on this, so I'm going to let her introduce those.
I've talked to some of you, but I really like Total Energy Tuner, and it's written in your worksheets. It is an app, and it is $3.99, but it's also a metronome. It's everything you want. And the reason why I really love this particular tuner is that it has a beautiful tone to have when you're playing. Like everyone knows the visual tuner, right? That shows the needle, if you're flat or sharp. But there's another type of tuner where it plays the pitch for you and you blend to it, okay? Now, you're probably saying, my little tuner has a pitch that we can blend to, but it kind of sounds like, right? If you can blend to that sound, I don't really want to hear you, okay? So we want to practice. I always think it's in your part, but intonation is like intonation. So the tone is very much part of being in tune. Okay, so we want to refine our tone as well as play in tune. Practice that at the same time. Okay. There are also other tuners like Dr. Beat that I grew up using, and I still have mine from high school, but that's about $160. They do last for a long time, but that also has a very good tone to it.
Okay, so now Jamie alluded to the drone, the tone that comes with a tuner. So we're going to do some demonstrations on exactly how to use that. So we're going to be very basic at first, just playing one note, just sort of establishing how you should be playing and how to figure out if you're flat or sharp. Because sometimes it's hard. You know that you're off, but it's which way do you go? So we're going to talk about that a little bit now.
So on this app, we have, or another tuner, you can have a sustained tone. Okay, very good, Leah. Now,
I played a D, right?
yes.
I'm playing it.
Yes, you did play a D. Now, the first thing that I would say is, when we're out of tune,
Hold that thought.
okay, when we're playing a note, especially in orchestra or at home, and everything is out of tune and we're playing with people, what is the first thing that we want to do? Do you have an idea? And how do you do that? While playing your pitch. Yes, very good. So we want to play softer. When we're out of tune, a lot of times we have the inclination to go louder because we want to establish that we are right or that this is the pitch that I can play or whatever it is, okay? But being in tune is not a thing that you can cross off on a chart. It's a collaborative experience, okay? So first step is play softer. Now, at home, we're collaborating with our drone, okay? So let's play softer, Leah, and see if we can listen to the drone and blend into the sound. Okay, so this was better. We heard the drone, but we heard there's something wrong about it, right?
Yeah, I'm having trouble figuring out if I'm sharp or flat. I know it's not quite right, so Do you have any suggestions for me?
Yes. I mean, yes. Okay, so basically, this is when we have the visual tuner, and the visual tuner is very helpful for us to see kind of where we are in the ballpark. Okay, so everyone knows what I'm talking about with the little tuners that go like this, and you see, and you can put it on and you play the note, and the needle will go all the way this way or all the way this way. That kind of tells you where you are. But then the other thing you can do is if you just have this drone, we can have you go really sharp first to have that sensation in your ear, and then go really flat, and then kind of work your way into the middle. Okay, let's have that demonstrated by Leah. Excellent. So what that does is it's training your ears. Sometimes we get a little too dependent on a tuner that goes like this because we're training our eyes rather than our ears. And being in tune is really focused on training your ear, actually. So if we can train our limitations of where sharp is and where flat is, we can really start developing this sensation, okay? And then also still playing softly, okay? Scale. So now, when we're at home, another thing we can do is to practice this flexibility is to play scales with that drum, okay? So we'll do a D scale. That's nice. Now, notice again how slow she played this, okay? She was really listening, and when things seem to be a little flat or sharper, and there's reasons for that, which, let's have Leah describe that.
Yeah, so you noticed there were some notes that immediately sounded just a little bit kind of buzzy and funky. So in intonation, I'm not going to go into the science of it, but the 3rd scale degree and the 5th scale degree, specifically, those are sort of the 2 ones that stick out. So in D major, that would be an F sharp and an A, are very finicky in terms of playing in tune. So the major 3rd, the F sharp, in order to be in tune, it actually needs to be a little bit flatter than it being exactly in line with the tuner in terms of hearing it. So and to give you the exact number of cents flat, it needs to be 14 cents flatter than we think it should be to sound in tune. And then the 5th, the A, needs to be just a tad sharp, so 2 cents above 0, above being in tune with the needle on the tuner, to sound as though it's in tune.
What is a cent?
What is
What is a cent?
a cent? So these are the markings on the tuner. So 0 would be in tune, 1 would be, like +1 would be just +1 sharp, +2 sharp, and so on. And -1 would be flat, -2. Yeah, that's a very basic way of explaining it. So if you're a little bit more advanced with your understanding of intonation, you can start to apply that when you play with the drone.
This is one reason what's helpful to have one of those visual tuners to kind of keep you in the ballpark. But then once you start feeling it and watching it, then you'll start listening to it. And nowadays, when I'm playing a piece and we're playing chords together, it kind of automatically just kind of happens. You know, not always, because we still have to practice this, but we're practicing our drones at home so that when we get to work and we're playing chords together, we know, okay, oh, third, okay, down, fifth, okay, up. You know, it's this flexibility that you're developing from practicing with the drone is so useful. And it's also a muscle, so you have to do it every day, very frequently, in order for it to really kind of stick with you, okay? Okay, we're moving on. So moving on to quality versus quantity. Now, I'm not going to name any names, but it is very important to have smaller but more continuous, more frequent practices than one long one at the end of the week before a jury, before a competition, before a concert, before your lesson, okay?
I'll say it in another way. So, a lot of times we can relate sports to music, even though they're totally different disciplines, but the way we approach training is you can draw a lot of similarities to athletes. And if you think of an Olympian, they have a very regimented schedule. You know, they know what they're going to be training for on this day, and then the next day it's something different, and then the next day it's something different, and it's all working up to the goal of the Olympics. So our Olympics might be, you know, our orchestra concert, competition, audition, a lesson even. Lessons are a great time to sort of judge your progress. So you wouldn't want, an Olympic athlete would not want to save all of their training for the week before, right? It's months and months in advance. If anyone's ever done any long distance running, like a marathon, that's like, you know, a 20-week training plan that you plan out in advance. So this applies very, very well to musicians and practicing for something coming up.
Yeah. So then, with all of this stuff that we just told you about, and everything else that you've worked with your teachers or coaches, we want to be able to kind of organize it and design a lesson or a practice plan. Okay, so I know you all have a lot of homework, and you have, you know, sports practices. I think, not a sports person, and then also there are other family commitments. So we have to really organize our time. One technique I like to use is a timer. So I have, you know, orchestra music, etudes, scales, all this stuff, and your parent tells you, you have to practice. I don't even know where to begin. So what I do is 5 minutes I allow to scale. I set my timer. After 5 minutes, I'm done with scales. And then I move on to my 10 minutes of etudes. After the timer goes, I'm moving on to solo rec. And even if you had 30 minutes a day or 20 minutes a day, you can organize that time so you can get really every ounce of energy out of those 5 minutes that you have, okay? And each time that timer dings, you realize that how much work you just got done. And you can move on to the next thing and be, and at the end of the day, really know that you accomplished something. It's great.
Yeah, and building off of that idea of accomplishment, the thing that can make practicing really fun is to sort of build in these little moments where you can see progress, or you can check something, you can check a box. So another strategy might be to make a chart, make a practice chart. So if you know you have something coming up, or you're just practicing weekly for your lessons, you can write your goals in and just check it off, or, you know, put a sticker if you're motivated by stickers, or colorful pencils, I don't know, whatever it does, or whatever you need to get you motivated, you know, more power to you. You should go for that method. And let's see. Yeah, and also, like Jamie said, when the timer goes off, you can feel like, wow, I really can get a lot accomplished in a small amount of time. Because sometimes it's hard to just get started. So if you say, okay, well, let me just, even if you do 2 minutes, it's better than 0. And you'll probably find that, you know what, I can go a little bit longer. Let me go up to 5, because 2 minutes, that was over in a flash and I got so much accomplished.
Yes. Okay, so now we've been so great and we've accomplished all of the stuff that we had to accomplish, and we still have some time because we were really organized with our practice and we were really thoughtful with using a metronome. Should I just put my flute away even though I really am enjoying playing this flute? No, we can make projects out of anything. There is this website called IMSLP, and it has so much music that you can learn, and you can just go wild. Pick any piece, your favorite piece off the radio, you can find it and then work on it by yourself, individual projects.
I am a what? I couldn't hear the last.
Oh, IMSLP. .org, I think, yeah. Oh yes, and then full circle. This is where you can also practice sight reading. So you pick a piece over there from IMSLP or from a teacher's book or from Evan or from your conductors, and you use all the concepts that we were just talking about, learning the notes slowly, going through your head, getting a pulse, playing with a tuner, all of these things we can apply from before.
So the last little thing we wanted to talk about is just knowing when to seek private instruction if that's not something you've ever done before. And I think we kind of alluded to it at the beginning of the talk. When you find that maybe you need help with certain questions about your instrument, rhythms, maybe just how to delve into some of the stuff we've talked about, you can get one-on-one instruction with the teacher can be really helpful. And also just for other kind of motivations like wanting to be more challenged or wanting to win the competition. So private teachers can really help beyond what like a in-school band director or orchestra director would be able to do. So I think we have time for some questions. If anyone has any, we'd be happy to entertain them.
Okay, so I don't know if it's under the purview of what we're doing here, but let's say for a moment you played it slow and you can do it at a tempo of 75, and the tempo that's finally going to be done is 180. Okay, what do you do to graduate up, etc.? How much of the increments do you do? You mentioned on social.
So the question was, you know, let's say your ability at the moment is to play a passage at 75 beats per minute, but it needs to be up to 180. So what's the process of getting from the slower tempo 75 to 180? And for me, it is, I like the penny method, which is I have 5 pennies on my stand, and so I would start at 75, which is where I could play it perfectly, right? You want to start at a place where you can play all the notes perfectly, the rhythms, no mistakes. So I have to do it 5 times through perfectly before I can move the tempo up. And how much you move the tempo up is kind of up for grabs. You could move it up literally 1, like to 76, 77. I mean, if you wanted to be extremely thorough. Or you could do maybe 4 at a time, up to 79, or 5 at a time. So, but if on my 5th penny, I make a mistake, I start over. So I slide all the pennies back on the stand and I start back at 1. So you'll quickly learn how to concentrate and focus during your practice session, because you'll find that you won't get any farther. And it's just a good way of training concentration and focus.
Also with that, if you're doing that, you want to set a timer, because this can be really frustrating, and sometimes during that day, you're not going to be able to get it up to the goal tempo. It's going to take some time. So you need to give yourself those muscles. It's just like a sport where, you know, you can't run a mile in the time that you want to run a mile 3 days before that's going to need to be happening, right? So we have to think kind of more forward thinking and really count back the amount of time that we really need to put into this piece to get it to the tempo that we want. So one day we might only be able to get it up 1 metronome click. It is okay. That is how a lot of us learn. And the more we establish great practice techniques like that, the faster you're going to learn in the future, okay? More questions? Yes? What the pulse is. Very good. Okay. Do you want to do that?
Well, the pulse is another way of saying the beat. It's just sort of a general term. So if like where we have the metronome set, that's the pulse, that's the beat. So for instance, when I was playing through with the metronome, that Peter and the Wolf excerpt, da-dum, ba-dum, ba-ba-dum, that was the pulse.
So, yeah, so that's also the quarter note for that. So a lot of times, I mean, in most music actually, in these examples, oh yeah, it's there. So in that example, you see 4/4 written in the part. You see that? Okay, so that determines that it's 4 beats per measure, which is, and it's a quarter note, right? So that just describes what exactly that pulse is going to be. Does that clarify it, or? Okay, great. Any other questions? You can be, yes. Right. Totally. This is a great question. So if we're just beginning these instruments, are we thinking about orchestral tone and, no. When we were talking about basically the whole lecture and starting with getting the right notes, that's our first priority. So we're going to work on that first, and then gradually we're going to go pulse. And those are pretty closely, like, you'll get both of those. And then we keep going, because music, there is no end. You can practice these things forever.
Just to build on that, intonation it's very important, but it is also kind of an advanced topic. So it's not something, are your daughters string players? Yeah, so that will come down the line, but in the beginning, everyone is just making a sound is an accomplishment, so. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, well, and it's all about how much time you have too. So these are all suggestions, and hopefully we gave some examples of how you can incorporate some of these techniques into your practice that maybe you heard about, but didn't really know how to do them. But how, depending on, it sort of depends on what stage you're at in the development in terms of how in-depth you go into these different topics. Any other questions?
Yes.
For a percussionist? Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's good.
So actually, for a percussionist, the tuner is not very relevant because they're playing all fixed pitch instruments. But definitely the metronome, because percussionists, their meat and potatoes is the pulse, is keeping the rhythm steady. So yeah, that should be probably almost a constant in their practice session. Yeah. Not that it shouldn't be for everyone else, but yes.
Recommended amount of practice by age, or when you know, what would have driven you away? What would you guys do? Would you suggest it for others? I mean, when you were
Yeah, this is a good question. How much practice is good amount of practice? Basically, practicing every day is great. Whether that be 5 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day, these are great amounts. The more, like we said, more frequent, smaller amounts of practice is much more important than, no practice, obviously, and then a lot of practice at the end of the week. So I think some of my younger students, I think it's a really great goal to have 15 to 20 minutes a day. This is junior high, but that's what do you say?
Well, I'm just thinking of sort of my experience when I was younger. I think when I was like 4th to 7th grade, maybe I was doing like 20 minutes a day or so. And then once I started to get a little bit more advanced and I could tolerate longer sessions, the sky's the limit. I think an advancing high school student probably needs to put an hour at least a day in, and it's sort of dictated by their seriousness and their goals and what kind of, if they want to do competitions or that kind of thing. So
Just to add, since we have kids that are like 4 and 5-year-old in the program, and at that age, if you get your instrument out, like at a minimum 3 times a week, that's great. What you should be going for is 5, building up to 7 days a week of taking your instrument out and going through the routines of what you're learning in class. And you want to add, Evan? No. Yeah, for the little kids that are just exploring playing an instrument for the first time.
Okay.
Daly's great, but
Yeah. No, really get it.
that's great. We have some really young musicians in here. It's awesome. So we have time for one more question, if there is one. Last chance.
I have a question.
Yes.
What are some things that you have done in your experience that helped you when you became kind of discouraged during a practice, when you're applying the techniques we learned at this, but for whatever reason it's not working out?
Probably one of the most encouraging things we can do as a musician is listen to professional musicians. Whether that be on YouTube, make sure that it's a professional musician that you're listening to. Also, going to concerts. Going to, just listening to music is probably the best thing you can do as a young musician, just to keep you encouraged and give you the idea of what you're actually working towards. And don't always listen to your instrument, it's great, but you can listen to, as a kid, I loved listening to musical theater. I just was very into it. And so I did not listen to oboe music, I listened to musical theater. That's great. Okay, well, thank you so much. I hope you have a very good practice session.
I had a question that I didn't think would apply for everybody, so I didn't
And might be easier for that. Okay. As he said,